What's going on, guys? Kevin here from thesportsgeek.com, and in this video I'm going to do a Q&A about daily fantasy sports. So I've been noticing I've been getting a lot of the same questions about daily fantasy sports and just about me in general over YouTube and email. So what I did was I decided to do a Q&A video. I sent out a survey asking for questions, got a bunch of questions back, and I took some of them here and I'm just going to run through them Q&A style. What is the maximum percentage of your bankroll you will play in a day? So I've done a video about bankroll management in the past. You can check it out on YouTube. Basically, I have a weekly bankroll that I go by, so it's the amount of money I'm willing to risk that I might lose each week, and then for the day, I'll divide that by 7. What percentage of your daily contests are cash games, and what percent are GPPs? So I'm basically a GPP player. If you don't know what that is, it's guaranteed prize pool. It's the larger contest on DraftKings where first place will win the most money, and then cash games are the 50-50s or heads up, where the top 50% roughly win about double their money back. So I've been doing mainly GPPs. I'm going for the big score. I'm not too worried about increasing my bankroll a little bit at a time. I highly recommend that for most people, but for me, I'm about 99% GPP right now. When you research for any DFS, where do you start? So I start every day on Fantasy Labs. You guys will hear me talk about them a lot. That's the main site I use. I've got a link to them in the description below if you don't have an account with them. Most of my research starts with Fantasy Labs. What is the fastest way to decide who to play for DFS leagues? I don't have the time to do the research, just want a quick pick. So again, Fantasy Labs, they have a lineup generator tool where you can generate some lineups. I would use that, or their lineup optimizer, same thing pretty much. That's probably the fastest way to decide who to play in DFS if you don't have a lot of time. Besides Fantasy Labs, what other sites can someone just starting out use to do research? So I would start with ESPN maybe, or DraftKings. Right in the DraftKings lobby, you can click on the player name and you can actually read a lot about that player, but a bunch of different stats, a bunch of good stuff right on DraftKings. I'm fully aware of stacking in football, but maybe you could provide a little more insight into stacking NBA teams. So NBA stacking is a little bit different. Again, with football, you have a quarterback throwing to a receiver so they can both get touchdown points. With basketball, there's only really assists that are correlated between two players. So a point guard might pass it to the center and he might score or something like that. So you can definitely stack players, but you don't want to be stacking as many players in the NBA. I've heard a lot of people talk about stacking 3 players at most. Sometimes you can stack 4 players depending on the value of the players. You play a lot of different sports and have success at all of them. What is the mainstay or common denominator across the board with your research? So yeah, again, I just started out with NBA this year. I don't follow the sport too much, but mostly it comes down to my research and using tools properly. So I've been using Fantasy Labs, which has really helped me. And I guess the common denominator across the board with my research is having an open mind, thinking outside of the box, fading high-owned players, and yeah, I guess kind of thinking outside of the box. So what is everyone else going to do on this day, and what can I do differently that might help me win? How much research do you do daily for fantasy sports? So I would say I do about 2 hours per day on average researching fantasy sports. So I do about 2 hours research, and then maybe 30 minutes to an hour building lineups for NBA, NHL, MLB when that comes around, and PGA. NFL is a little different. I spend a lot of hours building lineups, usually Sunday morning or Saturday. And again, for NFL, I'm doing about 2 hours per day on average. So I'll be researching throughout the week. And then usually Friday or Saturday, I put in about maybe 6, 7, 8 hours. So I do a lot more for NFL. Do you play at all using mass lineups or just larger entry fee GPPs? So I do a mix. I do the larger entry fee GPPs, but I also will enter a lot of lineups, multiple lineups into the smaller entry fee contests. How are DFS players able to pick someone who has done nothing all year the exact week they go off? So a lot of that would probably come down to luck, and some of it could be research. For example, let's say you're picking a quarterback maybe in week 10 who's been brutal all year, but maybe they're going against either a weak defense or a team who's coming off maybe 2 tough games and they're on short rest or something like that. There might be something that someone researches and digs into a player and finds out that he might have a good week this upcoming week, even if he's been brutal the whole year or whatever it happens to be. But I think a lot of it does come down to luck. Sometimes people on DraftKings will just have some random players. They've been doing poorly all season and they'll have a huge night and that person will look like a genius, where mainly it's just luck. I was wondering, when you hit it big, did you then decide to use your winnings to share your knowledge? No, if you guys had been following my YouTube channel, I actually had started my DFS videos before I hit it big in week 2 of the NFL season. So in week 2 of the NFL season, I actually did a video where I gave out Allen Robinson as one of my favorite plays of the week. And in that video, I did mention that I liked a stack of him and Bortles. They'd be low owned and they had a chance of going off big for a cheap price. So I actually had been doing the YouTube videos for DFS before I hit it big, and then I've just continued with it since. How long have you played DFS? So I've been playing DFS for about 2 years now, betting on sports for over 10 years, so I have a little bit of knowledge there. But yeah, DFS about 2 years. Can you give us full lineups? No, I cannot give you full lineups. I get this question all the time, but it doesn't really make sense at all, especially for GPP players, and especially when I'm giving out my picks to thousands of people. If you're gonna give your lineups to maybe, let's say, 5 friends, and you're gonna all play cash games with that lineup, then that would be fine. But if you're gonna enter a GPP, it wouldn't make sense, because if that lineup came in first, you'd have to split that prize 5 ways. So if I'm giving a lineup out to 1,000 people, let's say, and 1,000 of those people enter it in the same contest, you're gonna have to split the first 1,000 prizes 1,000 ways if it does hit first place. So yeah, it doesn't make sense to give out full lineups. I don't mind giving out a couple picks, because you can make endless number of combination of lineups with those picks. I'll get to the point. I hate my job. How hard is it to make a living from betting? So it's extremely hard to make a living from betting. I don't know anyone who does it, and I don't recommend it to anyone. If you're talking about DFS, again, I don't really recommend it. I like to look at it as a side income. So you want to try to do it to make a side income, that's great. It is still tough to do that, but I would never recommend doing it for a living. And same with betting on sports. Don't recommend doing it for a living. Really tough. You got to pay taxes on top of that if you do win. So yeah, I don't recommend trying to do it for a living. Who do you take advice from in the industry? So there's a bunch of different people that I follow, but some of the main ones would be Jonathan Bales, Peter Jennings, both Fantasy Labs co-founders, and then all the other guys from Fantasy Labs that write the daily articles. I love reading that kind of stuff. Adam Levitan puts out a good podcast from DraftKings for NFL and NBA. Those are the 3 main guys, and then yeah, all the guys from Fantasy Labs as well. Is there a different type of person playing the higher dollar amount contest versus the smaller dollar amount contests? I definitely think the higher dollar amount entry fees, so like the $300 entries, have a lot more sharp DFS players. So they're a lot tougher to win. So you can definitely cash easier if you're playing like the $3 or the $5 contest compared to the $300 ones. So the $300 ones are definitely filled with a lot of the best DFS players in the world. All right, so that's it for this video, but if you guys enjoyed this Q&A video, if you want me to do another one, I have about 200 or 300 more questions to look through. So just hit the thumbs up on YouTube. If I get enough thumbs up, I'll definitely do part 2 of this Q&A.